Hello and welcome to Chip Job, smashing the mobile phone secure chip for fun and digital forensics. My name is Gunnar Alendal and I am a PhD candidate at NTNU in Norway. And I am going to talk about one of the more bottlenecks in digital forensics these days, namely the digital forensic acquisition phase, which is getting data from a seized device, for example. So our research looked into modern smartphone devices and how hard it is to access user data on such devices without the user credentials. So we will only focus on the digital forensic acquisition phase, which is after you have seized the device and before you extract the data, so you can have plain text data for analysis and reporting phase of digital forensics. And just years back, this was not a challenge at all, because security was not a big issue and it was just a matter of gaining access to the data, sort of desolder flash and just read out the content, and then you can do the analysis and reporting fairly straightforward. But in recent years, this has of course changed a lot, because now our lives are mostly on smart devices. And of course, the security level had to increase as well because of this. And this mandatory security is now on all modern smartphones. And users cannot choose to disable it even. So you do have a secure mobile device purchased from the store, and the users don't have to enable it. So this is of course very good for user security, but it's of course a huge challenge for digital forensic acquisition, because now we need to either get hold of the user credentials or bypass the security mechanisms protecting the sensitive user data. So we looked into a modern smartphone from Samsung, which runs Android. So we looked into what actually prevents us from doing digital forensic acquisition of such a device. And there are all kinds of security mechanisms on such a smart device. And the most prevalent one protecting user data is of course the Android file-based encryption, which protects the user data if you don't have the key material for decrypting them. And we looked into paths to go and attack this model to see if we can extract data from devices without the knowledge of user credentials. And we figured out one such example path for doing digital forensic acquisition of the device is divided into two phases. It's the first breaking the rich execution environment, which is where most of the code, Android operating system and apps lives in an Android device. And then we needed to break a secure element chip, which was introduced recently on these phones, because this secure element chip protects the encryption layer and the sensitive key material that protects the file-based encryption for sensitive user data. So we need to look into the different phases of file-based encryption before we can attack the model. And we often talk about different states when we talk about file-based encryption. And file-based encryption basically has two storage types. It has the device encrypted DE storage, and it has the credential encrypted CE storage. And of course, a device powered off will have no such key material available. And if you desolder the storage flash, it will just have encrypted material. But if you power on such a device without entering user credentials, you will be in a before first unlock state, in BFU state. That means that the device encrypted storage will be available, because this is hardware protected key material. And if the hardware is happy with the boot, so it's considered a secure boot, then this key material will be available, so you can read out device encrypted files. But the credential encrypted files, where most of the user data is stored, is protected by this new secure element chip, and you need to get key material from that chip to be able to take the device from BFU to the after first unlock or AFU state to be able to access credential encrypted CE files. So we need to attack this model in some way. And we only focused on the second phase. So the first phase is basically gaining root on such a device or breaking the rich execution environment, which enables you to read out device encrypted files. And attacks on secure boot and rich execution environment that has been done before, and numerous of examples of vulnerabilities here exist. So we only looked at the second phase on this new secure element chip, which was introduced on new modern phones. So we need to first attack the rich execution environment to gain root, which we assume we already had, and then look if we can attack the secure element chip, which takes the device from BFU to AFU state. So without having the credentials, can we attack this to take the device from BFU to AFU state to do digital forensics of credential encrypted storage? To understand why we need to attack this secure element chip, we need to understand this state transition from BFU to AFU state. So if a user enters their PIN, password, or pattern on the screen, this will go into a key derivation function together with the salt, and this will eventually produce a challenge. And this challenge is sent for verification to the secure element chip, which, if the challenge is correct and matches the correct user credentials, then the secure element will return a secret, a corresponding secret, and together these three parameters are all that is needed to take the device from BFU to AFU state. So if you have the screen lock, this salt, and this secret, you can take the device from BFU to AFU state. But how do we attack this model? Well, first let's summarize there. You can see that these three are all that is needed. But to attack this model, we don't actually focus on the secret, because we can focus on the challenge that is produced from the KDF and eventually the password token to Weaver key, because it only has two uncertain parameters. That is the screen lock and the salt. So if we can gain hold of the challenge and we can gain hold of the salt, we can brute force the user credentials. So getting hold of the salt, we can assume that we can do this, since we assume that we already have passed phase 1 and have an exploit for the rich execution environment. So we can have the salt, since that's stored in a file that is DE encrypted. So we only need to break into the secure element chip and sort of steal the challenge. If we can take that challenge together with the salt, we can do off-device brute force. So you can see here the arrows in green. If we get the salt and the challenge, then brute force is fairly straightforward. So our attack looked at doing exactly this. So sort of to summarize, we just first break the rich execution environment. That is similar to what we call a root. And there are two reasons for this. The first reason is to get hold of the salt, of course, but also to be able to spawn a system privileged process that can actually talk to the secure element. So if we can assume we can do that, we can attack the secure element through its logical interface. So then we can attack the secure element chip, and we can gain hold of the challenge and the secret, and mostly the challenge is what we need to do brute force. So then we can do off-device brute force of this screen lock credential. So this sounds simple enough. So how do we attack this secure element chip? Just a few details on this secure element chip. It was introduced in Galaxy S20 models in 2020. Mostly on the Exynos devices. It is a black box chip, so it's standalone. It's running an ARM processor, and it has onboard flash and RAM to store both code and sensitive data. So this chip only has 258 kilobytes of onboard flash for storing both code and sensitive data, and it has 16 kilobytes of random access memory. And it's also CCEAL5+ certified, so some effort has been put in to secure this trusted computing design, that this chip should be protected and should be secured to secure this sensitive key material. And of course it's designed to protect against other attacks like hardware attacks and side channel attacks. And the design principle is that it should protect this key material and other features that it has against a completely compromised system. So even a fully compromised rich execution environment, like we assume in phase 1, it should protect the key material, so it should not trust the rich execution environment. And of course, that to be able to do that, it has its own brute force protection to protect against the rich execution environment bombarding it with challenge attempts. So this feature that this external secure element chip protects this key material, that is what Android refer to as a weaver support in their code. So since this is a black box, how do we attack it? Well, we can investigate and look at the processes talking to this secure element device. So you can reverse engineer this Herman's daemon process, which talks to the secure element chip. We can replace this with our own chip breaker tool to make it easier to develop code. Since we have a root on the device, we can put in our own code and our own process. So it communicates with APDU communication, and this is fairly normal for SIM cards. So you can see this secure element chip as sort of a SIM card just soldered onto the PCB. But we don't know anything running on the secure element chip. So if we can observe and implement rich execution environment side of the communication, we can send commands and data to the secure element. So using the APDU handlers on the secure element, we can talk to them, but we cannot get any response back. And this is a deal breaker if you're going to attack something, because you need some information leak back, because you don't get any logs from the secure element, you don't get any debug, you don't get any crashes, you get no information back. So this is what we mean about oracles. So we need some information leak oracles to be able to attack this. We identified 2 such oracles, and the first oracle is somewhat standard and easy. It's just looking at the APDU standard. It says that anyone communicating with APDUs must give a response back. So this means that the secure element chip must give you a response back even if you sent some wrong comments or wrong data. So no response means that's probably something crashed, and so that's a good response. So no response is a good response, but we don't know what happens if you don't get a response or a timeout of the protocol, but probably it's a good sign that something went wrong, meaning that's a good sign from an attacker point of view. Oracle 2 is a bit harder to locate, but if you look for oracles and APDU handlers that work in pairs, like they work on the same type of data, like any put or get or any send and receive type of functions, then you should or can be lucky to find such an oracle that will leak more data back from the secure element than it was supposed to. And we found one such oracle by combining the APDU write weaver and the APDU read weaver function, which are handlers running on the secure element chip. These are just my names for these, but these are running on the secure element chip, and they work on the same type of data. APDU write weaver is used when you set a new screen lock or change your screen lock on the mobile device. Then, of course, a new challenge and secret is generated, and this is sent to the secure element chip for storage. So you can verify this challenge when you try to verify your screen lock, but by using the APDU read weaver, which is then any attempt you do on the screen lock will end up in a challenge, and this challenge will be sent to the secure element chip and verified against the challenge set by APDU write weaver, and then you get the secret back. So can we abuse these to get an oracle? And we could, because we can manipulate the challenge and secret sizes to be able to get hold of more information leaking back than we were actually supposed to do. So we can use the write weaver to set false sizes for the challenge and secret, and we could then read back more data from the device than we were supposed to using the APDU read weaver. So these two combined gives the second oracle. This is just an example of a leak from this Oracle 2, and you can see that it leaks some data back when we are using APDU ReadWeaver with a larger size for the secret. So we can get 32 bytes of secret, which is the normal size of this the secret, but also much more data. And this is a stack leak, it turns out, and stack leak is very valuable when mounting an attack on this device. So these two oracles can be used to investigate this secure element black box chip, and we could also use this to discover a vulnerability in this secure element. So a long story short, we could trigger a buffer overflow in the APDU ReadWeaver by just sending in a large secret. So instead of sending in a 32-byte challenge and a 32-byte secret, we could send in a large secret with, for example, 255 bytes. The maximum is 255 since it's a single byte. And this triggered Oracle 1, which meant that probably something crashed. So with this buffer overflow triggered, we had excellent idea of something going wrong, and we could manipulate the stack on APDU ReadWeaver in some way to be able to exploit this device. And again, skipping some of the details are in the paper. You can see that by manipulating the APDU ReadWeaver, we have a complete buffer overflow, which makes us to control the secret of 32 bytes, you can see, and then the footer stored registers, and then the stored program counter. And if we can control the program counter, we can control the execution on this secure element chip. So using this, we could develop a full exploit for this secure element chip from the rich execution environment. So we could send in a manipulated challenge and secret and control the stack and then control execution. And then we could use this to return to a ROP gadget we located, which we were able to dump 16 bytes of arbitrary data from any address. So this means we could dump the full flash and the full random memory, random access memory. And dumping the flash is of course what we were going for as a goal, because then we could dump the secure storage, and that is dumping the challenge and the secret, which we assume we don't know as an attacker. So getting hold of the salt, which we assume we already had, and this challenge, we could exploit the secure element to give up, and we can read out. Then we have all we need to do an off-device brute force. So this code is basically all that is needed for a proof of concept Python script that if you have the salt and the stolen challenge there in green, then you can brute force, in this case, a pin fairly straightforward, and recover any pin off device with no problem. And we shall see a demonstration of this. It's just a simple Python script running on a CPU, so it's not optimized at all. It can be optimized on hardware. You can see the secure element challenge, and the salt is the only input we need. The KDF parameters is stored in the same file as the salt. And you can see that it immediately recovers the correct pin, and in just a minute and 38 seconds. And this is all that is needed to recover the screen lock. So with this, we can take the device from BFU to AFU state and access the CE, the credential encrypted storage. So conclude our research into this mobile device. It is that, well, it is possible just using a 0-day relocated and exploit that to take the device from BFU to AFU state, and combining this with an exploit in a rich execution environment. That's basically all we need to be able to do full digital forensic acquisition of the device. And this secure element chip S3K250AF in this Samsung Galaxy model, it is CCEAL certified, but that shouldn't discourage us to look for vulnerabilities to do digital forensic acquisition, because this was broken by a single buffer overflow, which was located by a single researcher. And so this is both encouraging and discouraging from depending on which hat you have put on. But also our attack was on the logical APDU interface, which means that if your rich execution environment exploit is remotely exploitable, then this attack can also be done remote. So you don't need physical access to the secure element chip. And also, since we can access to read and also write the flash, the question is if we can trust these devices after such a vulnerability has been discovered, because we can also write changes, persistent changes to the device. And also our future work is trying to look into removing this rich execution environment requirement, because now we require 2 exploits, one in rich execution and one in the secure element. We are looking into if we can remove this first rich execution environment exploitation requirement. And also I'm looking into, since I can do firmware modifications on the device, can I make them undetectable or hard to remove? So if a device like this, the secure element chip, had a serious vulnerability like this, can I install firmware modifications that can actually survive a firmware update from Samsung? And this is a summary of our work. Please read the full paper for all the details, and thank you for listening. And I will also thank my supervisor, Geir, Olav, and Stefan, and of course thank Samsung for the very professional handling of this issue once I reported it, and our great cooperation. So thank you all, and thank you for listening.